Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call precipitation that's not light that you get when it's above 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Heavy rain! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Look, you told me one time that your favorite jokes were when I state a fact. And so now I'm back.
What really got me was just the hesitation over Celsius.
I
there
thought
at the
it
end.
was centigrade, and then I realized I'd already said the L, and I was like, it's too late. Celsius.
Yeah.
Well, I'm your, I guess, Celsius host, Madelyn.
I'm your Fahrenheit host, Emma.
Should have been our Excelsior host, Emma.
No.
Isn't that an Avenger? Is that not an Avengers thing? Isn't Excelsior like an Avengers thing?
Oh, I guess it is some sort of Avengers thing, isn't it? Or Stan Lee thing, at least.
Oh, you're right. It's a Marvel thing.
Yeah. It's in the Lego games.
Yes.
It's in the Lego Avengers game when you get all the pieces or whatever.
No, I understood what you were referring to. I just didn't think that would maybe be the most iconic use.
That's really the only thing I know it from, I think.
And thanks for tuning into the show. This week, we're going to be talking about Heavy Rain, did you guess? And also Marvel's The Avengers, the video game.
Is it Marvel's The Avengers or is it Marvel's Avengers? I guess I didn't check.
Oh dear. Let's take a look, shall we? I sort of assumed, because I work at a company, it is just Marvel's Avengers. Because I work at a company where I am perpetually telling people there's a "the" in front of the name, and it needs to be capitalized, and you can't leave it off, I now add "thes" to everything.
The Marvel's Avengers.
Perfect. So it's going to be a fun little glitchy game Sunday.
Yeah?
Here at Talk This. Alright, time for Heavy Rain. Emma, go ahead and tell us about Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain
Shaun!
is,
Shaun!
Huh?
Shaun!
Yeah, that's Heavy Rain.
Jason!
Jason? Jason! No, Heavy Rain is one of the, well, it's not the earliest because they had more, but one of the earlier projects of David Cage's studio Quantum Dream, right?
Quantic Dream.
Quantic Dream. That's what it is. It's David Cage. That's the part that I remember.
It's really their earliest game that could be called successful.
I mean, there's some cult following around the Indigo Prophecy and the Fahrenheit one. Oh, topical.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. But it definitely was the one, I think it was the one that got started getting David Cage the most mainstream attention. It came out in 2010. It's if you've seen any of Detroit Become Human or Beyond Two Souls, it's very much in that Quantic Dream classic style, in that you have protagonists that you control, mostly through QuickTime events, and then also through decision making. And there's some investigative type things in there too. Yeah, we joke a lot on this show that's The Last of Us invented narrative in games. But for a while when Heavy Rain came out, that is also something that was thrown at Heavy Rain a lot. In that, wow, it's a serious story in a video game. But while The Last of Us has managed to retain enough positive feelings that people still throw that around, I think that Heavy Rain has... there are definitely people who still love Heavy Rain, but I think that it's sort of lowered in quality estimation. as the years have gone by and games have continued doing things.
Yes, it definitely, both in my experience of it and in my reading about other folks' experience of it, there are definitely portions, and potentially large portions of the game, depending on your feelings about it, that have not aged super well. So this is the game that I played this week, because we have it on disc, somehow. I kind of can't imagine you buying this, Emma, but you must have at some point.
Is it on disc? Wow.
Yeah, I really thought it was downloaded to the PS3, but it was not. And for a while I was like, oh man, maybe we don't have it. And then my boyfriend was like, no, it's on disc. Yeah, you remember when you wrote me those little notes with all the PS3 games?
Yeah.
You were like, your note for this one is like, no. I mean, important for game history, but no.
Yeah, I think I must have bought it for, like, my Games for Change class, because we were talking about, like, when games started, like, being taken, like, seriously as art or whatever, and this came up. I can't fully remember the context anymore, but that must have been when I got it to, like, play it. Yeah, I don't think I finished it.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I don't even know if I got to the Madison dream part. So
That's
I really did not get
best.
far into it. Yeah. I think I only played, like, the beginning of Ethan's story. But anyway, so Heavy Rain, there's 4 protagonists in Heavy Rain that you control. And it's the story of there's a criminal going around who's called the Origami Killer, who drowns young boys in rainwater.
Heavy rain.
Heavy rainwater, yes. And sort of your main protagonist, I guess, is Ethan, who is a father the first sequence is like the day that his one of his sons, Jason, gets lost in the mall and then hit by a car and dies.
Jason! Spoiler.
And there's a lot of... The press X to Jason is where that is from. Because there's a lot of wandering through the mall and shouting Jason. Which is cool in theory. I remember being like, wow, it's cool that the crowd is just being entirely uncooperative with me. Like, it felt anxiety-inducing, except that I was just hammering X, and he only has, like, 3 different ways to say
Yeah, he does not have
Jason.
enough Jasons for the length of that sequence.
Yeah. And now, in present day, his other son, Shaun, is kidnapped by the Origami Killer. And so he's going through various trials to save him. And then the other 3 characters are all some sort of, like, investigator. Madison is a journalist. Jaden is like it's Jaden, I think, is like a high-tech cop. And Scott Shelby is like a private investigator, who are all looking into the Origami Killer cases.
This is probably a good time to say, Emma, so far, I mean, has dropped spoilers, but they are spoilers that you get to within the first half hour of the game.
Yeah. Unless you get really stuck on, like, washing the dishes or something.
Which I did!
I
did! Okay, so let's talk about my gameplay experience with Heavy Rain before we get into true spoiler territory here, I guess. Yeah, so to the beginning of it, like, you eventually go to the mall with your wife and your two like 10 and like 7-year-old sons or so, right? Yeah. But at first you wake up and, like, your wife is out with the kids at the store to pick up stuff for them for lunch. So, like, you're an adult man waking up at like 11 a.m. maybe, generously.
Is he's like an architect?
He's an architect, yes.
Yeah, so he doesn't have, like, regular office hours, at least.
He seems to have a home office. I don't really know. Architect is... I guess I did know people who were in architecture school because my college had a good architecture school, so I guess I do know real architects. But architect I think of as mostly a fake movie job.
That's fair.
Yeah. No disrespect to architects out there. I know you exist and you do a real thing, but there are a lot of people in movies who are architects to make them, like, vaguely creative, but also believably making money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's an architect, and you wake up and you're like, I should, like, do some work and brush my teeth and stuff before the wife gets home. So, one, he's already slept until, like, noon, which is weird. It's a weird character beat that is just not remarked on by anyone. I did not successfully find my workspace in order to do work.
Yeah.
That was my big critique with the opening sequence of the game was I was like, oh, the walking around is sort of neat, the character thoughts are sort of neat, but I'm having a lot of trouble with things that my character would not believably have trouble with, right? Like, I felt a little bit, I was walking around outside in, like, just my boxers, right? And I was like, just because I couldn't find, he wouldn't get dressed until he showered, I didn't know where the bathroom was.
Ethan is sort of a dunce. Like, okay, so maybe it's in
here's
character.
The thing. So your wife gets home eventually. Like, time is passing, which I didn't realize. I didn't do any work, and she was a little disappointed in me. It's fine. But your wife gets home, and she's like, okay, I'm putting away the groceries. Like, can you get the dishes from where we keep them in the living room cupboard? First of all, that's weird. That's weird. You keep your dishes in the living room cupboard?
I think it's they're
plates?
nice dishes.
Okay, they were the nice dishes, but nobody said that until I got them out, and then jostled them on the table a little bit too hard because I didn't realize I hadn't quite picked up on the fact that it was a slow trigger event yet. Yeah. Anyway, I walked around for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I couldn't figure it out. I wasn't quite sure which thing was considered the living room because we have this weird open plan house.
Yeah.
And I was walking around and I picked up something else by accident that I thought might be opening a door to a cupboard. And my wife was like, you were supposed to get the dishes. What are you doing over there? And at this point, I'm starting to think, oh, okay, this opening sequence is about how Ethan has, like, severe ADHD and is an absent father. And, like, actually, it's not even possible for me to find the dishes. The point is that he has to do other things.
That's a real generous read on the gameplay and storytelling there.
That's what I thought was going on. I was like, he's just playing with toys. Like, my wife came home as I was, like, throwing... like a child's, like, glider toy outside. And I was like, oh, I get it. Like, and then I did eventually find the dishes and slam them on the table. I didn't actually break them, fortunately. But she was like, be careful with those. And I was like, I am. I didn't know. But my one problem with the beginning, other than the fact that shaking the controls kept, like, disconnecting my PS3 controller from the PS3. Like, I was running around in circles with my son and, like, could not stop, and it took me, like, 2 minutes to figure out, oh, the controller disconnected, and that's why it's not working. You see why I thought this was making some kind of point about the character?
Sure.
What was I even saying? Oh, but, like, some of the things, like, putting the dishes on the table, for example, or, like, opening doors, like, sometimes the amount of difficulty it took to do things didn't quite match what I felt like would be the amount of difficulty for the character. And I get that they have to train you how to do those things, but sometimes it was like, okay, like, should I really have to shake my controller this hard to, like, brush my teeth? So I get it. It's 2010. Like, I kind of enjoyed that, like, sequence around the house, because there were some things where I was like, oh, this does kind of in a cool way. Like, having to hold 2 buttons at once to carry the heavy groceries, I was like, oh, like, in some ways that does kind of give me that experience in a way that was neat.
Now imagine that with adaptive triggers, Madelyn.
Now imagine it with the PlayStation Move controller, which the game gives you as an option up front. I also really like that the difficulty settings, so they're, like, they each have kind of 2 statements associated with the difficulty settings. One's about, like, how often you play games, right? Mm-hmm. The other's about how comfortable you are with a wireless controller. Which is just so funny to me.
Yeah. You definitely got to know where all the buttons are in these games.
That is very true. Yeah, I didn't love the walking mechanic.
Yeah.
The walking in this game wasn't one of those things that I was like, oh my god, this is way harder than it needs to be. Like, just let me use the joystick, you madman. Because, yeah, like, that was giving me a lot of trouble. I feel like it took me forever to find Jason when he wandered off at the mall.
The first time?
Every time that he wandered off at the mall.
Sure.
Like, I thought I was following him, and it was just like there were so many people, and it's just like, you're incompetent, man. Like, he's holding a red balloon. How hard was it to follow him?
Yeah, I don't know why he lets him wander off when the clown gives him the balloon. Like, he's wandered off once. Like, just, like, hold him.
Yeah, I know. Well, also, it's just like, Jason is 10. Like, that whole sequence, like, it was sort of shocking, right? But it was also sort of shocking in the sense of, like, this is a 10-year-old? Like, I don't know.
Poor impulse control as a 10-year-old.
I get it, but the, like, running across the street and getting hit by a car just because he saw his dad. Like, why did he leave the mall in the first place? I don't know. Like,
saw something shiny. I don't know.
What, though? Like, he got his balloon from his dad, and then he's just, like, running around at you know. There are things about the game that worked, and then the things that felt like major story beats, if you think about them for more than a second. It's like, maybe this makes sense for, like, my 6-year-old. Like, if this happened to Shaun, that would be believable. But it just feels like a 10-year-old, like, absolutely disregarding any... Again, unless the trick is that he's inherited my severe ADHD.
Sure.
Which, maybe that is the gameplay that I set up for the game. But yeah, I played through right up until you switch characters for the first time. So I successfully watched my older son get killed and then moved into a dingy Philadelphia suburb and couldn't figure out how to make a snack for Shaun, but did manage to get him to do his homework and do dinner and go to bed. So 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
I opened the fridge and I was like trying to make him a snack, but I accidentally drank orange juice from the carton again. And then it wouldn't let me open the fridge again. So.
Oh man.
He got to watch TV with no snack.
Poor Shaun.
Actually, he did eventually get his own snack that I then couldn't pick up off the couch, which really bothered me. His bag of chips on the couch.
Yeah. So, we're probably going to talk about spoilers for this. Like, big spoilers for it.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it without talking about the ways that the ending in particular, but also some character introductions go. So, at this point, you've been spoiled on things that happen, like I said, up to about the first half hour of the game. Maybe, if you care about it jumping 2 years forward and him saying, "Heavy rain, it's been like this for weeks." But you're like maybe 2 hours into the game at this point, maybe. So if you're worried about spoiling the game, this is maybe a good time to fast forward to our discussion of Marvel's Avengers.
Yeah, if you've got some, like, David Cage marathon planned or something, you can skip ahead a little bit.
Okay, they're gone. Go ahead,
Emma. What am I going ahead with?
Whatever strikes your fancy.
Well, there are definitely some issues with this game in terms of some of its characters, some of its, like, mechanics. Have you ever seen... I guess you wouldn't have gotten to this scene, but there's a part where Jaden is, like, chasing a suspect through a supermarket, and you can pretty much fail, like, almost every QuickTime event in that, and, like, still catch the guy, I'm pretty sure. So, you can just, like, go on YouTube, and it's just, like, it turns into, like, a pratfall comedy, basically. Because there's all these QuickTime events, and if you just fail it, like, Jaden just becomes, like, the clumsiest man alive, and there should be, like, a background track of, like, you know? Which would be fine. Like, the fact that you can kind of turn it into a comedy seems like maybe that's something you should encourage, but I don't think the game is very... They want you to try to do the QuickTime events. They don't want you to purposely fail them.
Right.
Of course.
That's good, because I tried really hard in my juggling QuickTime events. And
Good.
It worked. Shaun thought I was so cool. Shaun didn't want to talk to me, and then I juggled for him, and he was like, "Dad, I didn't know you know how to juggle." And I was like, "I'll teach you sometime." And he was like, "That's cool." Anyway, go ahead.
Jaden also takes, like, super smarty drug that's killing him, so there's also that. Like, super cop smart drug. Or whatever.
Super cop smart drug.
He's got, like, some sort of thing embedded in his brain that, like, lets him oversee the crime scene. I don't fully remember what was going on with Jaden, to be honest. The other two characters are perhaps more worth talking about. So, like, Madison is a journalist character, and her first introduction is, like, a hokey slasher film, I guess. And that she wakes up in her underwear to an intruder in her home that you then have to fight off. But that it's apparently not. It's a dream. It's a dream sequence because she has insomnia, which I guess means you have really terrifying dreams.
Sure. Quantic dreams, even.
She's also, like, just unfortunately, like, not super necessary to the plot at any point. Like, she's kind of there to help Ethan. Ethan's going through these trials where he has to, like, injure himself in order to...
His son is Shaun is kidnapped. And then, yeah, he has to, like, prove how much he loves him by, like, crawling through broken glass and cutting his finger off and that kind of gruesome stuff.
Yeah. Also, like, driving a car at a certain speed against incoming traffic. And also murdering someone at some point. So, all those things. So Madison's sort of there to help Ethan when he's injured in his motel room. And also do some investigative journaling that always seems to get her into situations of threatened sexual violence or just violence sometimes, but sort of framed sexually. So her whole plotline is just slightly unfortunate, I would say.
It really is a shame that David Cage doesn't have, like, a co-writer.
Yeah.
It really feels like... I mean, I remember at least a little. It's been years, obviously. But we did an episode on Detroit Become Human, I think. Back when that was a new game.
Yeah, I think so.
And, yeah, it's just, like, there's always interesting stuff going on in terms of, like, the gameplay and how he's playing around with this, you know, interactive drama, kind of, like, movie game hybrid thing. But, man, somebody needs to come in and read it and be like, this is not good. Not all of it at all times, just pieces of it much of the time.
Yeah, in Madison's case, it's an unfortunate trend in his work that there's, like, sexual violence or, like, equivalent in the case of, like, Detroit Become Human, in that there's, like, they always get, like, tied up by weird mad scientists or something to that extent. Which, I mean, I don't know if it's really malicious. I just don't know if he really knows how to write any other situation, apparently. Because it somehow is always that for his female characters.
Well, it's just like the one black character in this game is bordering on, or perhaps more than bordering on, an offensive stereotype.
More than bordering on, I think is,
Yeah.
Pretty rough.
And we all know that Detroit Become Human showed us the way to end racism.
Yes.
So.
Oh, man, should have just sung at him.
If only.
Kissed your girlfriend.
Ugh.
Then racism would be ended.
Exactly. There you have it, listeners.
Have a Pepsi.
Stop that. But for me, overall, the thing that... I almost said Detroit Become Human, but, Heavy Rain was a real critical and commercial success at the time. Sold, like, 5 million copies, you know, catapulted David Cage into the mainstream, and got kind of almost universally really glowing reviews, despite the fact that it was a little bit glitchy and despite all of the things that rankle about it now. Which is interesting. In playing it, I sort of felt like I could sort of see it. I mean, the characters definitely are in that kind of, like, uncanny valley world. But for 2010, it's not that bad in terms of that.
Yeah.
For me, it's just, like, why is the voice acting so bad in this game where the voice acting is the only thing?
I think there was some facial rigging going on in Heavy Rain, like some real early facial rigging for video games, at least. Which is sometimes why their faces look like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if that impacted the voice acting at all.
I guess so.
Having to figure out those faces that make the voices work.
I didn't look up who the voice actors were. I mean, plenty of reviews cast the blame at potentially these being non-American actors playing Americans as part of the problem. But yeah, like the kids especially, but Ethan too, are just, there's weird choices going on and really clipped endings to things and just like robotic ways of saying, like they talked to the clown in the mall and I was like, the clown is here sounding like a human being for his like one line of dialogue. That's really, I think, what makes the game, I mean, aside from the casual sexism and perhaps the eye-rolling story twist at the end, but that to me is what makes the game not really work now, is the voice acting is so stilted that it's hard to not just spend the whole game laughing at that.
Yeah.
And
in that
also,
regard, David Cage's projects have come a long way in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully somebody listened to this and was like, dude, you sold 5 million copies of this game. Like, you now have the money to pay people to act. It's also, to be clear, it's also the awkward walking around that I did a lot of that was making me laugh so much, and that's a little bit less easily fixable.
Yeah.
But that's hard, right? It's sort of hard to be like, how do you represent that the character is more familiar with this space than you are? Because I think that was mostly what I struggled with, both in my original beautiful house and in my dingy second house, that like Ethan really should have known where things were, and I did not. Yeah.
So, in regards to that ending twist, and big spoilers here, so it's been kind of like people have been sort of thinking that maybe Ethan is the origami killer during the game. And he also has these periods of blackouts where he can't remember what he was doing.
Because he got hit by a car and went into a coma when his son died.
Yes.
Presumably.
So he has one of those when Shaun goes missing and finds himself with, like, origami in his pocket, right? Or something.
So the summary I went on Wikipedia was, like, different from what I experienced in the game, so I don't know if I had hit, like, a branching path or whatever. But yeah, in my game, I put Shaun to bed, and then I seemingly blacked out and came to somewhere else holding an origami thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember, too, so. But, so there's sort of this thought that, like, oh, well, maybe Ethan's doing it when he's unaware, that, like, maybe you're waiting for the twist for, but no! Actually, the origami killer is Scott Shelby, one of your other protagonists, who's been a private investigator looking into this case with one of the mothers of a former victim. And this is cool for, like, a few seconds when you're like, whoa, I wouldn't have guessed that. But then you think about it and you're like, the reason I wouldn't have guessed that is because he's thought and done things that don't make sense for him to be the origami killer. Particularly the thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is I think this is a really interesting twist and a really interesting commentary on, you know, the alienation between the player and the character, right? That could be interestingly executed. But the thought mechanics of this game, it's like, why would he be thinking something that disingenuous without a reason?
Yeah, that's the key issue, is that they're not careful enough with the thoughts that he has. So it comes off like he's also unaware that he's the origami killer, but that's not part of the twist. Yeah. He's been aware of it. And even recontextualizes a lot of his actions into doing other things to cover up himself in the crime, when you thought he was, like, investigating before. But because he's thinking to himself things that he really shouldn't be thinking if he's the origami killer. Like, the key part of, like, trying to pull off the twist where the protagonist was the killer the whole time is you don't want it to be lying to the player. You can not say things, right? Or cast things in a different light, but you don't want the person to be like, who is the origami killer? If only I could find out, to themselves in their head when they are the origami killer. Yeah. Unless you're, like, implying that they're being facetious or something, but that's not the case in this. It's just that it doesn't feel like that twist was thought out and incorporated through the thoughts specifically.
Which is a shame, because it's kind of a dope twist.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of a twist where it's like you've been doing this as a character and you've been thinking that they're doing one thing and they're doing something else. Like, that's cool. That's the part where I point to, like, that's a cool idea, David. Now get your co-writer editor in here to be like, here's a bunch of ways this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's like, it's a really neat idea that is just not executed cleanly. And I read somewhere that, like, they did they obviously did focus groups for the game, right? And the thing said, out of a focus group of 70, it was determined that none had figured out who the killer was before the game revealed it. And I was like, that actually feels bad. Yeah. Actually. Like,
that feels like a red flag to me.
Not that you want everyone to figure it out, or even a majority of people to figure it out, but it should feel like there's enough there that someone who's really looking for it should spot it. Yeah. Especially in, like, a whodunit kind of a game. Yeah, it feels bad. It doesn't feel good that no one could figure it out before you told them.
Yeah, it's very much, that kind of reminds me of, like, certain writers on TV shows lately that, like, go on, fan wikis and be like, well, we can't do this because they thought it would happen. When it's like, well, they think it would happen because
you've laid the groundwork for it.
Yeah. There's just sometimes in writers there's this idea of, like, well, we have to surprise them, and, like, yeah, you want it to be surprising, but you also want it to be like, oh yeah, I see that.
Exactly. Well, Heavy Rain, as it must, has a bunch of branching paths to the story, and one of the big selling points is that characters can die for real in your playthrough, and that can change the story a lot. But ultimately, really, you ought to go watch any video of the end with the Shaun glitch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the most important branching path to me.
Basically, I don't really understand how this triggers or, like, what happens to make this happen, but there are lots of videos of it where in this end moment where you're, like, saving Shaun, and then the killer is revealed and people die or don't die or whatever. Ethan's press X to Shaun just cannot go away.
Yeah.
And so you just get to ruin the cutscene by going, Shaun! Shaun! And his face will do it too. Like, it's not just, like, the audio is playing. Like, and the best part was, like, how did it go? He goes, Shaun! And he said, like, the killer's like, I can't do that, or I can't answer that, or something. Like, oh man, what was it? Oh, this is so bad. It's such a funny line, folks. You have to go watch the end, because he, like, responds to it like he's been asked something, and it's like, no.
Yeah. I also, like, it's a selling point in all of the David Cage games, like, oh, people can die. But also, I tend to find that, like, that sucks. It sucks when one of your protagonists dies early in the story, you
Yeah.
know? Like, why would you want that to happen? It doesn't add anything particularly cool
I know, it's
in
a
most
weird
of his
punishment
stories.
for you, like, making a mistake at the game.
Yeah. Unless
I mean,
it's
whatever.
Detroit
This game
Become
wants you to-
Human.
This game
which
wants you to
case-
play it multiple times, so, like, whatever, but, you know.
I do like in Detroit Become Human, Marcus and Kara can die. Connor can die at, like, 10 times because they just keep putting him in a new body. So you can get him killed, like, in every encounter up until the end, and he'll still be there, which is
Incredible.
great.
Well, folks, I'll close with this anecdote. That this game was inspired by a real incident where David Cage briefly lost his son in a mall. Which made him
That would be
reflect-
scary.
I mean, yes, for sure. But imagine briefly losing your child in a mall, and your inspiration from that is, a game about a serial killer.
Yeah.
But hey, it's the original dad game.
It is.
It's probably not. But I'm going to say that. In the same way, The Last of Us invented narrative, but this invented the dad game.
It still haunts us to this day.
Could never escape the dad.
He hovers behind you, screaming, Shaun!
Shaun! Shaun! Alright, well, time to talk about something different entirely.
Yes.
Another thing where fan wikis are important. That would have been the natural transition point, but I had to talk about the mall story. It's Marvel's Avengers!
Yeah. Who remembers that Marvel's Avengers came out within a year?
Pretty much exactly 6 months ago.
Yeah. Do you remember it?
It's so crazy. I mean, whatever, let me introduce the game first, but it's so crazy that there's this big Avengers game that was released. Avengers, Marvel, like, the biggest entertainment thing. I can't freaking escape WandaVision anywhere I go. It's everywhere.
I just keep getting those memes of, like, that one line that everyone loved, and now people are just replacing things on it.
Yes. What is Shaun, if not Shaun persevering?
Yes. Maybe, no, what is Shaun if not Jason persevering?
What is Shaun, if Shaun, not per Shaun?
There, make that for today, for Twitter. That's good. That's a good crossover.
No, it's not. Who wants a crossover with 11-year-old video game Heavy Rain and WandaVision, which I have not watched?
It's good for the Twitter.
I'll consider it. I'll see if I can find the screen grab. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I literally can't escape Marvel except for this game, which theoretically should be the Marvel property in which I am the most interested at this point, given that I am roughly 8 years behind in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the MCU hasn't even been around really for 8 years, has it? When did Iron Man come out? I don't know. I guess in like 2008, right? Something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, I am probably roughly 8 years behind in the MCU. Give or take a Guardians of the Galaxy. So theoretically, the Marvel's Avengers should be the property that I might know the most about. And yet, I know nothing. I mean, I know enough for the show, but It's interesting to me that this feels like it should be a giant video game, and instead, nothing.
Yeah. I remember being, like, decently excited for it when they, like, announced it was happening.
Yeah.
And we knew nothing about the game. I was just like, oh, Crystal Dynamics making an Avengers game? That seems neat.
Yeah.
And that was about all that was shown about it. And then we got the...
I remember that E3 trailer or whatever.
Yeah.
Where it was like, oh, they look just like Chris Hemsworth, but they don't sound like him.
Yeah. They look like very off-brand versions of the MCU. Which, you know, before I get into criticizing that, you do have to wonder how much of it is, like, corporate mandates. I am sure Crystal Dynamics had tons of people
just a
from
tome of requirements.
Square Enix, from Disney, from Marvel, just breathing down their necks during this whole development process. And maybe that is the reason why it is the way it is. But
counterpoint, Kingdom Hearts is unhinged. Go on.
Kingdom Hearts managed to get made before Disney was like, Disney, you know?
Yeah.
And now it's out of their control. They you know,
it's
too late.
Everyone's control.
It's too late for them to rein that back in.
Anyway,
they can pretend Deep Jungle didn't exist, but it did. That chimp fell in love with Donald, and I will not forget when Clayton was murdered.
You can't tell me Nomura isn't gonna bring it back. You can't tell me he didn't start the rumor that Disney doesn't have the license anymore so that he can bring it back in a climactic way in Kingdom Hearts 5.
I hope so.
Okay, not a Kingdom Hearts podcast. Go on, Marvel,
anyway,
the Avengers.
There
Marvel's
was
Avengers.
the A-Day trailer, which showed off just Black Widow, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Hulk doing their thing. And they all just look like legally distinct versions of the actors playing them. And people were a little bit, like, disappointed in that, right? Like, there's this game, you know, the Spider-Man game had come out, the Spider-Man in that. He now looks like Tom Holland for some reason.
Stop that.
But he's, like, grown up doing college, like, doing adult things. It's different than any of the other Spider-Man movies that have been made. So people were hoping it'd be like that. And they were just kind of disappointed that it was sort of like MCU light. I was disappointed. Again, I'm assuming this was from some sort of corporate mandate, or maybe the developers were just passionate about these characters. But I do wish they'd gone into the comics and picked some other lineup. Even if they still had, like, Iron Man and Captain America, like, maybe filled them out with other comics characters. Like, if the MCU has proven anything, you can sell characters that absolutely nobody knows.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know, though. Can you do that with essentially a live service game, though?
I mean, in some ways that might be better, because then you introduce, like, bigger characters later. You know? I
get it. It's hard for me to imagine launching a game called Marvel's Avengers without, like, Iron Man. Or
sure, I'm not saying get rid of all of these. I don't think you can. But there are definitely Avengers lineups in the comics that are not the ones in the movies. You know, that has some of those characters, but other ones as well, including ones that haven't really shown up in the movies, or, like, different versions of them. And it feels like they should have been free to do that, and that maybe there's a decent amount of crossover between comic book fans and video game fans, you know, or at least they share interests, and so maybe you could have gone a little deeper and people would have responded to that still. But this is what it ended up with. So the A-Day trailer was met with
derision.
Just indifference, kinda, too.
Yeah.
Deep nothing.
Yeah.
And it just sort of continued from there. They revealed that it was going to be a live service game, but with a single-player element. And that was about all they really had to say about it. And then I saw a little bit more excitement for it when they revealed that the protagonist of the single-player game was going to be Miss Marvel, or Kamala Khan, because she's a new and interesting character that isn't in the movies yet. One day she will be, God knows. But she's not yet, so she's like a distinct part from that. But even that wasn't really enough to get people back into that. They revealed her very late, like pretty close to the release date.
And it wasn't really clear in her reveal that, like, she's the protagonist.
Yeah. There was just some, like, not great communication surrounding the game. And then it came out, and it was a little buggy, and there wasn't a ton of stuff to do, and updates weren't super frequent, and it just sort of... I guess.
And that's what's so bizarre to me, is, again, this is the biggest entertainment property in the world. I mean, maybe you can fight with Star Wars, right? But, like, this is clearly, top 3 or 4 biggest entertainment properties that exist right now. And, like, it's baffling to me the ways in which they fumbled it. Right? Like, they certainly have, I mean, as a voice cast goes, they have some big-name voice actors, right?
Yeah.
Which in some ways is good, right? It can definitely be wrong. It can be a real misstep to bring in celebrity movie actors to voice your game, right? You're probably going to get something better with Nolan North doing it, as he is in this game. But you're really going to tell me Disney isn't going to pay for the actors to voice it? Right? Like, why are we doing a knockoff version for, like, the Marvel game?
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's a weird, like, middle ground. That, again, it just kind of reeks of, like, a lot of too many fingers in the pie. I don't know, Because it's not like an official Avengers game, right? Because it's not voiced. I mean, could all those actors do voice acting? I have doubts, to be honest. But it's not voiced by the people that portray them. They only sort of look like them.
I mean, I guess what I'll say is, like,
lineup.
Frankly, isn't being in a Marvel movie mostly voice acting?
I guess that's true, yeah.
Like, at this point these days, how much of the actual action are you doing, and how much is your face being CG'd onto...
That's fair.
Yeah.
You're right. Maybe I'm too skeptical. I think Hollywood talent being brought into voice acting en masse is a bad trend.
I agree. I just think if you're gonna make Marvel's Avengers, like, why isn't Robert Downey Jr. doing it?
I mean, especially if you're gonna make Marvel's Avengers and, like, the first thing you show, like, it's not even like that's like your, like, that's not even the premise, right? The premise is that the event, like, Captain America died. Yeah, right. But he died during A-Day, and the Avengers all broke up, and now, like, Kamala Khan, there's some inciting event, and she's gonna go bring them all together again. Well, so it's not even like they're your main party, but that is how they introduced it. Like, that's a selling point, that they have, like, off-brand Chris Evans swinging a shield around. It's like, why isn't he, like, I understand that, like, they have designs, and, like, Captain America sort of looks like Chris Evans, that's why they cast him. But, like, still, like, if you're gonna have the entire lineup and have them all look like knockoffs.
I know.
Like, maybe it would be fine if it was just, like, 1 or 2 of them, but they're all there.
I think
minus Hawkeye, which, like, a good riddance, I guess.
I think what's especially weird for me about this is, what's so remarkable or alarming, depending on how you feel about Disney, or both, frankly, about the MCU, is how plotted and interconnected it is. Especially now, I mean, we're now in this thing where it's like, they're going to have TV where it's plotted and connected too.
Yeah, that's where they've lost me.
I mean, fair enough. If you're not going to subscribe to Disney Plus, you're not going to subscribe to Disney Plus. Yeah. You can basically watch the show on Twitter. I feel like I know what happened. Anyway. But, they have this, like, very connected, certainly in the movies and now in television media network around it. And really engaged fan base and, like, all these fan theories and connections and thinking around it. And yet all of the Marvel video games, I mean, this extends to the Marvel Ultimate. Obviously, Marvel Ultimate Alliance was, like, a series that existed before the MCU was cool, right? Yeah. And arguably when I was the most into Marvel. was with, like, before the MCU became, like, you have to go to the movies 20 times a year to keep up. But it seems odd to me that even though video games are a larger market than movies, right? Video games make more money than movies do, that any game version of Marvel is totally siloed from the MCU. Like, it's not a part of the MCU. It's something totally separate. Which, on the one hand, like, good. There should be somewhere where people can play with these characters that doesn't have to be connected to that. On the other hand, what a missed opportunity. We've proven that people will follow these characters wherever. Why not make the games part of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would find that a little bit.
Look, it would be gross. I agree.
Yeah.
It'd be gross in a certain way. But on the other hand, it feels weirdly unstrategic, the way the games are handled, where they're like, we're gonna start everything all over. And it's like, but I have 10 years of history with Iron... Like, why would I want to start everything all over when I've spent 13 years with Iron Man, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely the casual consumer viewpoint. I think anyone who's into comics has more of an understanding of, like, resetting things and having different versions of the characters by, like, different writers, right?
Sure, but it just feels like a waste, like, oh, we're gonna reset to, like, generic Iron Man?
Yeah.
Like, if we're gonna do that...
The thing is, it's not even, like, generic Iron Man, though. It's not Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man.
Exactly.
Like, even, like, the first trailer, like, the pacing, the delivery, the dialogue, it's very Robert Downey Jr., even though it's like, whoever it is.
Yeah.
I don't remember who voiced each character. It's Nolan North or whoever.
Yeah.
So it's like they were inviting comparisons, and, like, some bigwig up there was expecting those comparisons to be good. You know? When, like, anyone probably could have told you down on, like, the lower levels, like, no! Their Twitter will be mean about this.
Yeah. Well, to me it does feel like the natural comparison here, not just because they're both Disney properties and not sort of only just because they're huge cultural properties, is to the ongoing, mostly failure of Star Wars games to be any good, with occasional bright spots.
Yeah.
It really does not seem like anyone has cracked the live service giant cultural property game.
There's Destiny is probably
but Destiny's
the
not
thing
based,
that
Destiny's not based on something else, right?
No, it's not.
That's what I'm talking about. Of course there are live service games. I mean, they're not my thing, really, but of course there are live service games that work. I just mean, it doesn't seem like anyone has cracked the presumably giant cash cow that would be a successful live service game based on a wildly successful licensed property.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting to me that the reviews for this game, for Marvel's Avengers, are all very much like, the single player is pretty good and pretty interesting, and, like, Kamala's a really fun character, mostly because we don't know her from the movies. And, yeah, it's fun to get to noodle around as Captain America, even though you don't really have all the powers you wish you'd had. And then you get to the multiplayer, and they're like, it's boring, it's repetitive, it's grindy, it's only about to get grindier with the new update that's coming. And, like, you paid $60 for this live service game, where the microtransactions aren't that bad, but they're there. And not that you can't pay $60 for a 12-hour single-player game, right? That's fine. But it does feel like it's trying to be, like, 5 different things, and sort of succeeding in a couple, and mostly not.
Yeah. When brands try to do things like this, it's like they're always afraid of, like, trying it out.
Yeah.
You know? In some ways, it's like, let's put our most, like, conservative, careful thing out there and, like, see if it works, you know?
But that's why it's so surprising to see that from Marvel, of all people, because it does feel like the MCU has been a giant exercise in let's throw weird characters at people, and look, they're still gonna burn money to us on the altar of Marvel. So it's just bizarre to me to watch the games be kind of perpetually pretty vanilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that this should have been like the Marvel Academy mobile game I had on my phone.
Avengers Academy. Longtime fans. You had to be there, folks. You had to be there.
I'm just saying I would play a AAA version, like detailed version of Avengers Academy. And I would eat it up. Genshin Impact, but Avengers Academy. Just saying, you got an exploitative moneymaker there.
Yeah, I mean, really, the free-to-play Genshin Impact, some kind of Marvel thing, that feels like it should be huge. So now that we've come up with one unrelated game idea, are you ready to try to mash these two games together?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're going to rewind the MCU a little bit so Tony Stark isn't dead.
It's Captain America. Oh, you're right. You're right.
Cap probably dies at several points too, but I'm rewinding from Robert Downey being like, I'm out.
Yeah,
we'll see.
and Chris Evans, the meme, the I don't think I will meme, where we leave him at the end of the MCU so far.
And Peter Parker has been hit by a bus, and Iron Man needs to come to terms with the death of his quasi-son.
Oh no.
It's a dad game.
I was gonna ask, like, which Avenger is the dad? And you're right, for going from not MCU, the knockoff MCU, it's Iron Man, you're right.
Yeah.
He's the dad.
Peter...
Does literally have a real child in the later movies.
Shh.
We've wound past that. I got it.
No, we haven't. The real child can exist. That's fine. Peter, like,
okay.
Again, I know most of this from Twitter, but, like, isn't Peter his son?
Like, not genetically.
Well, that's a very small-minded way to think about it.
It feels more like he's like a very absentee uncle. Seems like the right description.
Okay, what other dads exist in a fun way? Can't be the X-Men. The X-Men aren't allowed yet.
You're right.
And we can't do Spider-Man because Spider-Man would have to be a PS4 exclusive.
Oh yeah, you're
PS5
right.
exclusive, I guess.
Oh
it's a
man,
new game.
That's scrapped. You gotta scrap that. If you could give Iron Man another young person to be his son.
Don't frame it that way in the beginning.
So one of them has a son. The one of them has to be a dad.
I don't feel
some sort.
Like, do we want to I really feel like metaphorical dad.
No, yeah, they can be a metaphorical dad. That's fine.
Let's see. Okay, our theme line is, what is Marvel if not dad persevering?
Very good. Love it.
I don't think Marvel's the right first word, but I haven't quite figured out what the theme of the game is yet. What is mutant?
What is son if not dad persevering?
Stop it! Come on, you know more about Marvel than me these days, I think. Who would make a good dad here? It can't be Iron Man. We gotta pick a weirder dad.
I mean, we could go to the nerdy side and do something with Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, although I'm not totally clear on what their relationship is. I don't think it's romantic.
Are they both Hawkeye? Isn't Kate Bishop a Hawkeye too? Okay.
Yeah.
So does one of them
I have
die?
the one... Yeah, he dies.
Okay. Oh, it's a
daughter
mom game. Can't be a daughter game.
It's a daughter game.
No. No, maybe that's right. Maybe it should.
The daughter game is the evolved form of the dad game.
You're right.
So we're taking the dad and we're modernizing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
I don't think they're that far apart in age, but whatever. It's the principle of the thing. He's the mentor. She's the mentee.
Sure. We can age him up a little bit, too. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, Hawkeye dies. Everybody cheers. I'm sorry. If he's knockoff MCU Hawkeye, everybody cheers.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, got it.
But whatever, it's emotional. It's an emotional scene. Hawkeye is dead. His bow and arrow failed him against a, extrasolar threat or something.
Okay.
He's dead. I'm hoping an idea will come to me. And everybody's real broken up about this. Everyone's like, oh man, Hawkeye and his weird farm, we loved him so much.
I'm waiting for you to get to the point.
And Kate Hawkeye, vows revenge against the alien threat. But, okay, it's like a sneaky alien threat, right? Like, it's like an infection of some sort. That's like...
Okay.
Infecting people, like
the studio exec just raised their eyebrows. But go on,
like a serial killer, like some sort of alien comic booky thing that replicates like what a serial killer would do, like functionally in a story,
like a virus.
Yes, but like alien-y,
Okay, sure, an alien virus,
like Venom. It's some sort of like Venom thing, maybe, but like. Kills them, right?
Okay, cool.
There's precedent for this, is what I'm saying.
I'm just saying, my studio executive is going too soon, but go on.
It doesn't have to be like an illness. It's something that kills people, and they don't know what it is. So,
okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's a serial killer, but it's some sort of alien.
Right? It's like I got it. Sure, that's fine.
So Kate is determined to figure out what is happening, and sort of avenge the death of Hawkeye.
I like avenge. Go on. That was nice.
And then, Lucky the pizza dog, very important character to Hawkeye lore, vanishes, and she starts getting like mysterious things of like, if you want to know what happened to your father and your dog, like follow these instructions, and she sort of has to skirt the gray zone between heroism and villainy in order to find like justice. And there's a lot of conflict with that with other heroes from within the Marvel universe.
In the end, can the killer be like toxic spores from Baby Groot?
No, you can't kill Baby Groot. In the Heavy Rain spirit, it's Captain America.
Stop that. No, that's poetic. Captain America spreading a virus that kills his people? Ooh.
Oh my god. Ooh. Yeah, it's the Captain America from that time when he was like a Hydra in the comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. People really didn't like that, but it's something like that.
Right. So we're gonna pull Nazi Captain America to spread a virus around the country. Good. Yeah. Good.
Yes, that's
Disney
my
will
idea.
approve this.
That's my proposal.
What's the gameplay?
It's sort of like investigating. We take like the investigating elements, as well as like conversations. Like we do like really down to earth superheroes, like the Netflix shows, sort of. So you've got to talk with all these different heroes about, like, the things you're doing and the fact that, like, they're bad, but, like, they're for justice or whatever.
Yeah.
And get into, like, moral arguments with them, and maybe you have to fight them sometimes, and there's, like, maybe we could add some, like, action elements to that. Maybe we could have more of an action.
Yeah, let's flesh out the QTEs a little bit into more beat-em-ups, yeah.
There could definitely still be, like hero QTs, like the cool ones that are in the Avengers as well. But a little bit more fleshed out in the fights. But there's definitely the, like, looking around and gathering evidence and talking to people elements.
Can I buy dumb cosmetic skins?
Of course.
Good.
Gotta.
Good.
You know, I'm all for that in games. Like, just let me, in your very serious video game, let me put aviators on the characters.
Well, I feel like that's in the spirit of Heavy Rain, of, like, this is trying to be very serious, and it's very silly.
Yeah.
So, I think that's inspired.
Yeah.
I was worried for a moment this was going to be a game about grief, and I was going to be like, Emma, we just did that.
No, it's about justice.
What is grief? What is justice, if not grief persevering?
Exactly.
I think that line's perfectly fine, but it is very memeable.
Yeah.
I have no hate for the original line, but you can't give me something where I can insert my own words quite so easily as that.
Yeah, it's like very much the same phenomenon as, like, the shot of Daenerys with the wings in Game of Thrones. Like, that's a perfectly fine shot. It's fine. It's not inspired. You don't really have to. You can have fun with it, but I am a little bit like, you don't really have to make fun of the people who like it. Like, have fun with it, but you don't have to be like, you're stupid. But that's just Twitter, so that's just how it works.
Well, on that lovely note, listeners, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone. Oh man, we are long, so do that spiel, Madelyn.
Okay, so hey, check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. We're also at our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, see the games that are in the hat Emma's about to pull from, and check out the blog, long-running series, Clickbait Boyfriend, Split Screen. You know the drill. Go listen to this in the last episode if you want the deets. Finally, you should subscribe to the show. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, anywhere you can find podcasts. Talk This. Emma, what's in 2 weeks?
That was speedy. Our old game is going to be Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
Ooh. I've forgotten it already.
And our new game is The Pathless.
Dope. Amnesia and The Pathless, there's a good joke there. Just wait. I won't think of it until 5 minutes before the show, if that, but I think there's a joke there.
Next week's my side quest pick, you'll find out what it is when we get there.
Just before the show, Emma said, I came up with something great, and I've already forgotten it. So we're in that Amnesia theme already.
Yes, we're pathless.
Well, listeners, once again, thanks for tuning in. Always great to have you with us. We made it to March, listeners. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Let's see. Emma, do you want to sign off? Or should I sign off?
You do it.
Okay. Listeners, I hope... Shaun! This week...